Ho pilamaya, ampetuluta kiel lila. Ho na miechu umpion ka opila chichapie. Etkelakje meglaat hangt aan jong ka. Si chango ayate etanwa uksto. Ayon quickly a machape. Na la colia e hake ke kui hemie. Cha Kungashiwa Joe Black Bear chap chahe Oglala Makoche etan ichachma. I am the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and I thank you for hearing me. Our office is responsible for the preservation and protection of cultural resources, sacred sites, the land, the water, all resources, and the traditions of our people, the Sichango Oyate. We do this with the natural wopre and the customs of our people. And that began since the creation of the universe and the creation of time and space. And those are called the universal laws. I heard one time that man-made laws can be broken. But the natural wopre, the natural laws, cannot be broken without repercussions. These laws are what makes us sovereign people. The Tribal Historic Preservation Officers work within the laws of our people, the wopre, and the man-made laws of the imposing culture. And it starts with NAGPRA of 1990. Since then, and this past year, I was reporting in December of 2022 that Rosebud Sioux Tribe had submitted comments to changes, and most of the changes that we requested had passed. So that is good news. And we work with the ARPA, the Archaeological Resource Protection Act of 1979. That is within our office as well. And the National Environment Policy Act of 1970. Under this law, there was two aspects created. One is called the Environmental Impact Statement, and the other is called the Environmental Assessment Statement. And I'll show you in a minute how the laws are manipulated. And so we don't get a clear environmental impact statement, and we do not get a clear environmental assessment statement. And we work with the Native American, the National Museum of the Native American Indian, and this again was from the 1989 Act. And within that, NAGPRA and the National Museum of the American Indian Act are closely related, and they are connected as well. So we really can't do much with repatriating items from the museums without the museum's involvement. And then we work with the American Indian Freedom of Religion Act, passed in 1994. And there again, too, there needs to be some work done. So this past year, we did work with NAGPRA. We submitted comments, and then we submitted comments for the National Historic Preservation Act. We are currently working on the Bulletin 38, trying to define what the traditional cultural properties would be for Native Americans. And we want to define them. We don't need anybody to sit in and tell us what our traditional cultural properties are. The law itself says that we define them, and we are going to do just that. Now, language, I know language was discussed, and it is so important that I want to say more about it. Language is crucial in the interpretation of both the natural law, the Watershed, and the man-made laws. Language is very, very crucial. And I'll tell you why. As Lakota people, our language is what we call in our language, Gatian. It is straightforward. We do not manipulate our words. We mean what we say, and we say what we mean. That is our language, Gatian, straightforward. Now, the language of the other culture, the legislators of the United States government, their language is so easy to manipulate. With the changing of one word, it could mean something completely different. And that is how their language is. And that is how we learn to read them, and we're going to have to interpret them. And in doing so, we need to apply some changes to these laws. So it is up to THPOs and the offices, the staff, to actually look at these laws and interpret them to the best of our abilities and change what we need to and stand on it. We have different concepts as cultures. Our concepts of thought, philosophy are so much different. We look at life differently. We look at the concepts of life, everyday life, so much differently. We are grateful for every day that we can breathe, for every day that we have good health, every day that we can see our relatives. And like Chief Seattle said, you white men, you walk on the graves of your ancestors, and you don't care. We people, we natives, we look at the graves of our ancestors and we honor them. We are different cultures, indeed. Other cultures look at our rocks, our ia, and they think it's just another rock. The archaeologists of the other culture, they look at our rock as just that, an object. They look at them as insignificant, not important at all. But we know from our stories that at the time of creation, Ian gave his blood. He gave everything so that Unchimaka could live and so that we could be here today. They tell our stories, the Ian. I was in a lodge one time when my mother made a remark. She told me, don't be afraid to give them all your troubles, all your problems. They were here first. And they will be here when we're long gone. They will still be here to tell the story. And that is so true. We were a biodegradable people. Everything that we used went back into Uchimanka. But the Iya remains to tell that story of our people. So we have to educate the other side, meaning the Washichu archaeologist, that these rocks are here and that they have a story to tell. The stone circles, the cairns, they give information on birth. Some of these cairns hold the afterbirth of our people. And some of these cairns hold the remains of our people. They give direction. They tell of significant events, of things that happened long ago. The flora, the fauna that we regard sacred, the four-leggeds, the wahupacosa, the crawlers, every plant. They give us food, they give us nourishment, they give us medicine. But that is not the way the Washichu look at our flora, our fauna. We see them as relatives, but they see them as inanimate objects. They see them as inferior beings. They don't look at them the way that we do. Federal agencies tend to compartmentalize life. They do. They don't have a holistic view of life that we do. So they have the game, the wildlife, the BLM, the Park Service, the all the other agencies, the Corps of Engineers looking after the water. So they dissected life as we know it. They have people looking after water. They have people looking after plants, some looking after four-legged, some looking after the winged ones. So they did compartmentalize life. What we call mitakuye oyasti, they took that apart. And so we have to work with all of these federal agencies, whether they're making roads, whether looking after wildlife or the water. They can't seem to get it together so that they have a holistic view of things, of our Onchimaka that we do. When I was about 6 years old, I dug a hole. I was digging a hole, and my grandma came out and told me, she said, no, you put all that back. But before I covered it back up, she put a little tobacco in there. And she told me, you never dig a hole. If you do, you dig a hole with a prayer for whatever reason. And you always cover it back up. Because if you don't, you are looking for something to go in there. And I always remember that when I see all these mining companies digging and digging. Takucha olepe lakha, I say. Ena takucha olepi. They're looking for whatever it is, and they will find it. They fail to understand the complete holistic concept of the true people of this land. We are the true people of this land. Where's the drum roll? We are. TCSs, the tribal cultural specialists that we send out, they carry a big, big responsibility. And we do not just pick somebody or anybody and send them out. We set them down and we teach them first their own history of our homelands, the Aboriginal homelands, way up into Canada, way down south. We teach them who they are and the movements of our people, both to north, south, east, west, and up and down. We teach them that there are ethics involved in their work. We teach them about the other side of things, which is the archaeological methods and techniques that are out there. And the 5 Washitu laws that we have to work within. So they carry a big responsibility of not only looking for the remains of our people, remains being both the human remains and the things that were left behind. So they know how to look for them. They know how to record them. We teach them about the natural laws, that while they're out in the field, they never take a life of an animal or a plant. But they have to be able to recognize the medicinal plants out there. And the four-leggeds, the wingeds that we hold sacred. So they carry a big responsibility, and we so highly appreciate them. Now, they also know, as the scouts that they are, and that's the name I give them, they know to always have the truth.
No, go ahead.
People really started to recognize the power of activism on Twitter. Based on that one tweet, the hashtag Mr. Silver was trending. If anything,
Hi, go get my headphones. They're charging at the computer. Hurry up.
So the other culture fails to understand the holistic concept of the true people of this land. And in doing so, we have to look at the history of where they came from and what happened so that they came over here. We have to look at who they were before they came here and after they came here. When you look at the world history of European conflicts, you see that all their conflicts stem from religion, from beliefs, from religious beliefs. And a lot of their conflicts were over resources. If you remember, one of the infamous wars was the revolution in France. What happened there was the wealthier people got wealthier. They got rich off of the Unshika people, the poor people. And there was a lady by the name of Marie Antoinette saying that famous quote she had about let them eat cake. Well, her head was in a basket by sometime later by the poor people. And those are the concepts that they bring here, that they want to deplete resources as they did back in their own country. They depleted the resources basically and needed a new place to get more resources. And here we were living in a wealthy country, wealthy by means of resources, good clean water, trees, medicines. And that's really how I understand what brought them here. So I want to go over one more thing, and that is that the United Nations criteria for a sovereign nation, it includes the land. Sovereign nation must own their own land. But what if that land was stolen? A sovereign nation must have their own language. Their own language. We have our own. It is a bit disheartening because not too many young people speak their language, but to the ones that do, I am so grateful because you are the ones that will keep us sovereign. We have our own social systems. That is another criteria. We do. Philmon here, from my mother's mother and his mother's side, we're related. We have blood between us. And he married my cousin from my dad's side. And my younger sister decided to call him her brother-in-law. And so there's some crazy stories between those two, but I won't get into that now. But we do still carry our social systems. I do still see him as my relative, the way that it should be. Government is another criteria. We had our own government system. I want to take that back. We have our own government system. And it's sitting right here in this room. The treaty councils, that is our government system. That is our true government system. Our leadership. We still have our leadership. 2 years ago, there was a ceremony in Rosebud making one of our uncles, an elder, a Yatapika. Yatapika. His name was Victor Duville. His name is Victor Duville. He's the Yatapika from the Rosebud Sioux tribe, from the Sichango Oyate. And last of all, the last criteria that they have for us is actually spirituality. And it has been here all along. And it's something that we need to value more than it has been. It needs to be honored, needs to be done with honor and respect. And although we are an inclusive people, my mother used to tell me that the bowl of that pipe is round. It's inclusive. We are an inclusive people. However, when somebody teaches you something, you do not take it and make it your own. That is what has been happening with our spirituality. The same people that have oppressed our people for so long They wouldn't let us practice our spirituality, calling us heathens and pagans and whatever else. They are some of the people that are taking our spirituality and using it, making it their own. We have to be aware. Be aware of the 7 criteria if we are to call ourselves a sovereign nation. In December, I stood up here asking for unity. Yupdayala, together. Take that word home with you and think about it, and think about how it could be if that little word was to manifest. Yupdayala. I had a relative this morning talk about that. Steve Brave talking about we need to unite as tribes. And I thought to myself, okay, we said that in December. We said it again this morning. I'll probably be saying it again this afternoon, which is what I'm doing. But we need to stop saying it. We need to stop talking it. We need to do it. We need to come together. Yupdayala. Take that word home. Oh, echeglai prinkte mitakoye oyasi.
Oh, waste. Na pek upo lilai pia ogalakelo. Ata. Ahang ogalala cheta. Reno Red Cloud. Le I ogalaki te ki le maniki ogalaki. Ta ana hoptan kapo. Lila ta ana hoptan kapo. Kun okichi zekta heche le ekte menegele. Ta. Oshichu go meniunka kini choktik shata.
While he's setting up, I got a quick funny story. My nephew, he usually, checks in a hotel, and then he goes to the sauna. So he went into the sauna, and next thing you know, the 2 Oglalas came in. Next thing you know, they were singing a song. Next thing you know, he said the sparks started flying, so he had to get out of there. He said, "Mitakoyasi," and then he got out of there. The Oglalas are really powerful.
Good afternoon. I want to do an introduction. My name's Reno Red Cloud. I'm the Oglala Sioux Tribe Water Resource Department Director. Just a little bit about myself. I am the 6th generation of the Chanupa. Was Chief Red Cloud. My great-grandfather is Jack Red Cloud. My grandfather is James Howard Red Cloud. My grandfather is Edgar. Then my dad, Reno, and then myself. So I'm 6th generation straight down the line. Male lineage from Chief Red Cloud. But today I wanted to just give you a little history of my experience with working with the tribe. When I was younger, I went to school at Red Cloud and Pine Ridge School, and then in the early 70s, I had a family trauma. I went to school in California, and I came back in 1978. And that's when I started working with the Oglala Sioux Tribe Water Resource Department. I'm in Water Development Department. My history is all water resource, I'm in water programs with the Oglala Sioux Tribe. 1978 to 1983, water development, 1983 to 1991, OST water and sewer, 1994 to 2010, the Mini Wachoni Water Project, 2013 to now, the OST Water Resource Department. So all my work history is water. So, but today I wanted to emphasize something that a group that I am working with, and that's the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. I've been with them since 2013. I think back in the 2000s and to 2006, they were created by 3 different tribes. I think it was Oglala Sioux, Rosebud, Standing Rock back then, and then they deactivated for a while, and then they reactivated in 2013. So, but one of the primary reasons we reactivated was treaty water rights. Back in 2013, there was a Missouri River issue with Missouri River. So that was a surplus water report with the Pix Loan Act. So we stood our ground with the treaty water rights then, and we still are to this day. But here's our board of directors. We have Doug Krogos, chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. Myself, Reno Red Cloud Senior, the vice chairman of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. Elizabeth Wakeman, secretary, Flandreau Santee Sioux Tribe. Mary Jane Gourneau, Lower Brule Sioux Tribe. Syed Huck, water resource director, Rosebud Sioux Tribe. And we just added on Bob Walters from the Cheyenne Sioux Tribal Council. Okay, and then a lot of our work we're doing right now is we're doing liaison outreach to tribes in the Great Plains region. We're doing a lot of drought mitigation. We were active in an opposition to KXL and DAPL. Just last week, we had a meeting in Standing Rock on the DAPL with Mike Connors. He's the United States Assistant Secretary. And they're doing an EIS up there, but there's still issues that are affecting the tribes that we addressed last week. So we'll be waiting for a response on them. Okay, some of the cumulative impacts emphasize need for agencies to consult with tribes on cumulative impacts of permits, projects to climate, weather stations on monitoring in Indian country, networking other intertribal organizations. I'm proud to say that Pine Ridge never had a weather station. We just got one this past year, so we're on the map with weather stations. Okay, and then our Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance protection of water in the Black Hills. When I got on in 2013, we were opposing the Dewey Burdock in situ uranium mining, opposing the underground injection control permits and aquifer exemptions issued on EPA on November 17, 2020. We participated in the Environmental Analysis Board appeal. You know, on that issue there, that was during an administration where Mr. Donald Trump was the president. And at that time, he just literally just bypassed tribal consultation and went straight to approving the water permits for the Dewey Burdock. So, but we appealed it, and we're still in the appeal stage. So we're still exercising our rights to protect the water in the Black Hills. And I'll get with Lilias here. She'll get on after my presentation. I got Lilias Jardin to emphasize her issues with Black Hills Clean Water Alliance. Okay, oppose the Converse County oil and gas project. Participated in an environmental impact state process in opposition to amended plan, filed protest to oil and gas leases, denied by the BLM December 2020, monitoring status of legal challenges by environmental groups. With BLM, this is just something I found out a couple weeks ago, that with this issue with this mineral withdrawal with Pactola Lake and Rapid Creek, the Black Hills National Forest does the surface, but the underground minerals and stuff is done by the BLM. So, I'm learning as I go along too, but I'm glad that we're coming together, and I'm glad that there's an opportunity for the tribes to look at furthering their protections and preservation of our treaty lands. One thing I found out too at a meeting a couple weeks ago was there's a mineral withdrawal that's being exercised. And all this time, the tribes have been having tribal consultations, and they never utilized that mineral withdrawal process on a tribal level. I think that should be looked at in the future for consultations, that we can exercise mineral withdrawals within the Black Hills. So that was just something that was brought to my attention too. So, okay, and then I'll let Lilias go into the Black Hills National Forest withdrawal. Okay, concerns with the West River Water District Missouri River importation designed for future municipal and industrial development in the Black Hills region. This past year, there was a proposal from a group here, I think it's in Rapid City, from the West River District, Missouri River, where they were trying to, or they still are active in developing a water project from the Missouri River to Rapid City to the Black Hills. But I think it got defeated this year for funding in the state legislation, but they're gonna still try to move it forward for support in the future. So, and then the last one is support withdrawal of Rapid Creek Watershed, the General Mining Act. Okay, the Tribal Water Alliance, support for withdrawal. The Board of Directors has developed a resolution in support of the withdrawal of 20,574 acres of land in Rapid Creek Watershed from the General Mining Act of 1872, Mineral Leasing Act of 1920, and related laws. The board has authorized the submission of comments in support of the proposed withdrawal as the first step toward additional withdrawals from the mining. Comments are due June 20th, 2023. The board continues to oppose the Dewey Burdock in situ uranium mining proposed F3 New Work project and other environmentally destructive mining projects in the sacred Haisapa. One thing that's really, to me, is detrimental is this 1872 Mining Act is still in effect right now as we speak. And that's when General George Custer found gold in the Black Hills. And yet it's still a act that still hasn't been amended, hasn't been contested, and it's still ongoing. I'm glad that this issue with the Black Hills National Forest is coming to a forefront, because all these years of mining in the Black Hills, in my opinion, the Black Hills National Forest has been a rubber stamp for the state of South Dakota in their state mining permits. So I'm glad that there's a movement now that we could look at mineral withdrawals. We can enhance our tribal unity to address cultural surveys in the Black Hills. Seems like it's all coming together, but it's in a slow process, but we're still effective in fighting for our treaty rights. Okay, the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, protection of Missouri River, treaty rights to use of waters in the Missouri River, to ensure adequate stream flows and reservoir levels to fulfill tribal water needs, water quality hazardous liquid pipelines, KXL, DAPL. It was a godsend that Biden came in and they stopped the KXL because we fought that all the way through the process. Even went to the state legislative offices and gave our testimonies, and we've seen how really the state of South Dakota is Republican and how much they have an influence on destroying our treaty lands. Objections to non-Indian water projects, Red River Valley, Rapid City water importation plan, that's West Dakota. The need for the Corps of Engineers to revise Missouri River. You know, the Corps has Missouri River Master Manual, and it just mentions trust responsibility or honoring treaties. But in reality, they don't really engage us with consultation is not meaningful. One thing that stuck to my mind today is when Andy Reid said earlier, he said the US government said we were incompetent. That's why we had to have a trust responsibility for Native Americans, because we couldn't govern ourselves. That is the biggest lie ever, the biggest injustice for our indigenous nations. Okay, rescission of moratorium by Secretary Deb Haaland, memorandum of April 22nd, 2022. The moratorium imposed procedural hurdles in the adoption or enactment of water codes for Indian tribes with constitutions that require secretarial approval of such codes. This temporary moratorium created unnecessary confusion for nearly 50 years regarding the department's willingness to work with and support Indian tribes considering water regulations within their reservations. The Morton Memorandum is inconsistent with modern principles of tribal self-determination and the federal trust responsibility to support tribal sovereignty. I hereby rescind Secretary Morton's memorandum. The approval and implementation of tribal water codes may result to jurisdiction disputes over non-Indian water uses on free land. I am the water administration, and one thing that is so frustrating about land on the reservation and administering and managing it is the fee land. Our whole reservation is just checkerboarded with fee lands. And then all the fee land is governed or jurisdiction by the state. So that is just totally disheartening for us to really exercise our sovereignty on our water codes. One thing that I've realized too, that with the water codes, I think it was 74, they did a moratorium with this, what they're talking about. But back then, I think the BIA was afraid to get into treaty water rights issues. They really worked with the smaller tribes, with settlements like in the West, the smaller tribes. But when it came to us treaty tribes, they backed off because they didn't want to go into federal court and back us up. That is just my opinion of this. So, but now that this moratorium is off, I know Rosebud, Syed, and myself, we submitted our water codes to the BIA, but yet they're still sitting there and they're not acting on them. So we still got to push this forward. Yes. You know what? The last I know, it went to Aberdeen, and there was the Aberdeen regional director, but that's where it stalled. But
Can you use the microphone? State your name.
Sorry, I forgot about that. My name is Paula Antonio from the Sichago Ayate Land Office in Rosebud. But Syed and I asked the local agency yesterday, and they told us that they have a letter that they developed to send out to the tribes, but they send it to the solicitor for their review before they send it out to the tribes on the water codes that were submitted.
I think the big picture with these water codes is this, if we could have one uniform jurisdiction on the reservation, and that is the tribe's jurisdiction. So that's what we're fighting for right now. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask Miss Lilias Jardin to go into detail on the mineral withdrawal.
One quick comment for
All
Reno.
right, give him a round of applause, a good report.
One quick comment for Reno. I don't know, well, Andy is here, maybe you could talk to him on the side about, remember the checkerboard jurisdiction you mentioned, possibly why can't tribes use eminent domain over those areas inside the treaty boundaries? Thank you.
I think the BIA is so ineffective that we need to go to. Deb Halen would be a good one for that.
Before you go, the treaty councils are planning a trip to Washington, DC. So let's talk about that. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lilias Jardin. I'm with Black Hills, excuse me, Black Hills Clean Water Alliance. We're based in Rapid City. We work to oppose new large-scale mining in the Black Hills and to protect the water. So I had a whole presentation, but I'm going to scratch that and just talk about a few things that I think are the most important things. So this is a map of the Black Hills. The light green is land that the Forest Service more or less controls. The yellow and purple and light brown are all mining claims, active mining claims. So as of the end of last month, there were 261,000 acres of active mining claims in the Black Hills. That's 20% of the entire Black Hills land is under active mining claims. And that's 77,000 more acres than a year ago. So we're under a mining rush. There's a mining rush going on. So I want to just talk real quickly about the nature of the mining rush, and then I want to talk about the mineral withdrawal. So the northern part of the hills, most of the claims up there are gold claims. There's one company that has state permits to drill up to 1,600 holes for exploration for gold. There's another company that has two projects that are currently undergoing the Forest Service review process. And one of them is just immediately west of Spearfish Canyon. The other is southwest of Spearfish Canyon. So there's just a huge area that's covered with claims up there. In the central Black Hills, if you can read it from back there, you can see where Peshla is located. It's a few miles from claims from a company that's out of Canada called Mineral Mountain Resources. They've been doing exploratory drilling off and on for about 4 years. And then to the east of that, around Lake Pactola, and in both of these are in the Rapid Creek watershed. So they feed water to Rapid City, Ellsworth Air Force Base, and on down the Cheyenne River to tribal and rural communities. When you get into the southern part of the Black Hills, there's some gold activity there near the town of Custer. And then there's also a lot of lithium mining activity that's getting going, and that is for batteries for electric vehicles. There are 9 lithium mining operators in the Black Hills. There are 4 mining licenses for lithium active in the Black Hills and some mining going on. The state laws on that are totally inadequate. There's a 1-page application and you can go mine lithium. Pay $100 a year. And then in the far southwest part that's where the uranium activity has been for some years. That's already been talked about. And that company wanted to start mining in 2009. Their latest want to start mining date is 2024. So the Oglala Sioux tribe and some of our organizations have been quite successful in slowing that down. The claims, all these claims are filed under the 1872 mining law, which Reno mentioned. That law was designed to bring settlers into the West. And it did a good job, because what it said was, if you can stake a claim for mining, you have the absolute right under this law to explore for minerals. And if you find minerals, you have the absolute right to mine them. So all someone has to do is file a claim, and if they can find something, they get the right to mine. It goes all the way to the right to mine. And they can move other people off the land. Okay. So this is a law that there have been many attempts to amend, but none of them have been successful. And it's in place 151 years later. Okay. So in March, the forest, well, there's a project called the F3 Gold Company's Jenny Gulch project, which is immediately by Lake Pactola Reservoir. And the public had been commenting on that project, and the tribes had been commenting on that project for several years. And the Forest Service, as a result of pushing from the tribes and the public and Ellsworth Air Force Base, decided to propose a mineral claims withdrawal on part of that area. It includes the area where that F3 Gold Jenny Gulch project would mine if they got mining permission. And what a mining withdrawal does, a mineral withdrawal does, is it removes the 1872 mining law, and it removes the claims. And so it means that somebody can't have a claim there, develop a mine there, drill there, or mine there. Okay. So the Forest Service suggested 20,574 acres, as Reno mentioned. Comments are due June 20th. And a lot of people are asking for more territory to be included, because it's just a small portion of what's needed in that immediate area even. And because a lot of people think the whole Black Hills should be where the withdrawal is. So that's my part of the background for Reno to continue. Thank you.
While Reno is returning to the microphone, I just wanted to interject right here at this moment to my relatives of the Ocheti Shakoi. This is very important this is why the treaty councils need to organize themselves. The tribes and the treaty councils should open the headquarters here in the Black Hills. And one of those departments could be this, so that we have a 24/7 presence here in the Black Hills to watch over the Black Hills mining. The other thing that's not being addressed today is the oil and gas. I think if you recall, Reno, there was a project in Converse County, Wyoming, where they were going to drill it. There's probably in process of drilling 5,000 oil wells. That's just what west of the Black Hills in the Wyoming territory. The state of Wyoming survives on oil and gas revenues. So, and then they're drilling oil wells close to the Black Hills. So these are things that I'd like for you to think about. If the tribes, we could submit some kind of a budget proposal to start creating a headquarters in the Black Hills. We really need to seriously think about that. Thank you.
There's a resolution I wanted to read, but I'm not, but I'll tell you what, I'll probably make some copies of it.
Bill. Daku e pa o akihi, lecha. Before Reno gets started, first of all, my name is Darla Black and I'm the legislative liaison to the Oglala Sioux Tribe President. Frank Starr comes on. I just want to thank the treaty organizers here because the last presenter is Ruth Buffalo. And I'm grateful that you included this missing and murdered Indigenous women in human trafficking within your treaty information, because we should all be making resolutions. We should all be creating legislation in the protection of our children, because it's beginning with our children, the human trafficking. Because of organs, the sale of organs, human organs. And not only that, but a lot of them are going overseas. We think that's where our women are going. And if you look at Facebook now, we have a lot of people, a lot of young, all across Ocheti, Shakoya. It's not just the Oglalas. It's all the different tribes. We have some really young girls missing here. So while they were getting ready, I just wanted to thank once again the treaty organizers here for bringing her, because the work that she did is really significant to us. And as a mother and a grandmother, and as a woman that speaks for my people, I'm really grateful to you. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I want to thank Ruth for being here. She's my sister, and we work together as MMIW advocates. And she was very instrumental in Savannah's Act out of North Dakota. And if you're not familiar with Savannah's Act, she'll touch on, you know, how she became involved in that. So, wopilai chichab.
Okay, this is a resolution from the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. It's gonna go to the Great Plains Tribal Chairman's Association next week. But I wanted to get the blessing of the Treaty Council, or, you know, the review and a comment from this resolution. Okay, I'm gonna read the resolution. Resolution of the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance Incorporated supporting the withdrawal of the Rapid Creek Watershed from the mining laws and mineral leasing laws of the United States as a first step towards enhanced protection against destructive mining in the sacred Hesapa. Whereas the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance Incorporated is a coalition of Indian nations working to preserve and enhance the prior paramount and superior reserved water rights of the Missouri River under Aboriginal title and the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty and the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. And whereas the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance Incorporated is an advisory body of the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association and provides technical support to the association in the areas of water, energy, and other natural resource issues. And whereas as its sacred obligation, the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance provides technical and policy recommendations for the protection of all water resources for the next 7 generations. Whereas as signatories to the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty and the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, the Indian nations of the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance Incorporated possess treaty rights to the sacred Haisapa, and historically, the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management have violated our treaty rights in the administration of the General Mining Act of 1872, the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920, and the related mineral leasing laws. And whereas the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance Incorporated has opposed environmentally destructive projects in the sacred Haisapa, including the proposed Dewey Burdock in situ uranium mining, the proposed F3 Jenny Gulch gold mining, exploration in the Rapid Creek Watershed, and the proposed F3 Reward gold mining exploration project. And the U.S. Forest Service has filed an application with the Bureau of Land Management to withdraw 20,574 acres of land in the Rapid Creek Watershed from the General Mining Act and the Mineral Leasing Act and related mineral leasing. Yeah, I'm gonna need to move this down a little bit. Hang on here. Well, I can't get to the rest of it yet, but what I wanted to do was just get the blessing of the Treaty Council today on this resolution. And we're gonna move it forward next week at a Great Plains Tribal Chairman's Association meeting. You know, just to close out today's presentation, I'm glad that I'm seeing coordination and organization with the treaty councils, with our IRA governments, traditional governments, our elderly councils, our water alliance, like what I'm a part of. And I like what Miss Ione Quigley said earlier about the THPOs, getting them together. So I think it would be a strong force if we get our THPOs together, so that whenever there is a cultural survey done in the Black Hills, they could come together and unite, just like we're doing with the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. Because I think if we have a strong THPO organization, that'll be a frontline protector for our treaty cultural surveys. My opinion is, we get one cultural survey in the Black Hills, that's going to set a precedence that that's sacred land and treaty land, and there are a lot of artifacts, TCPs, traditional cultural properties there. So it's gonna probably literally slow or stop a lot of the mining projects going on in there, because they know they're gonna have to do cultural surveys and follow the process of the NHPA section 106. You know, this is just me thinking, you know, we go through the NEPA process and we go through the EA and the EIS, but I think it's time that the tribes just start suing legal action against these corporations and against the state of South Dakota for breaking our violating our treaties. That's just, you know, I think we just need to just go right to the level of just nation to nation and just start taking legal action against these guys instead of going through the NEPA process. But other than that, if there's any other questions, yes, Mr. Means.
My question has to do with withdrawal of the area.
You know what? That was a good question that we had at these meetings, because this one here, they're just right now, it's they're looking, I think, at a 2-year for now, but the longest term is a 20-year, and that's what they're looking at, is a 20. But a lot of the tribes that I've discussed this with, they're looking at perpetuity, forever with the tribes. You know what I mean? That's going to be our public comment and our statements. that we want, no mining in the Black Hills for perpetuity, forever. So those are, just to emphasize, June 20th, anybody in here, any, individual tribal member, you could get on, Lilias, get on that site and they could do their public comments till June 20th. Is that the day? Maybe if you can, Lilias, you could share that, public comment link to Phil and, okay. Okay, Lilias has cards, and if you, the more comments, the better, especially from the tribal members and organizations. So, but other than that, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Hey, Reno. Before you go, where it says F3 reward gold mining, is it supposed to be Newark? Was that a typo there?
You know, this is a draft, but yeah, I think it's Newark Drilling Project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, now you can clap for him.
One more question, before you, close that, are we gonna insert the removal of the Black Hills from the Mining Act? I asked the, therefore be it resolved that the, Ochete Shakoi Treaty Council's, request that, President Biden, remove the, Black Hills from the, Mining Act of 1872.
Yeah, but you know what, whatever recommendations, because this is in draft, and it was done today. This resolution was done today. So it's still, but if you guys want to add on some comments, you're more than welcome. Then that way, like, we could present it.
Prove it now. This is by unanimous consent.
Because it's still in draft, and then we could say, we got your comments, and
At this time, my relatives, we're going to approve of this resolution coming from the Ochete Shakoi Treaty Councils. And how we're going to do that is with unanimous consent. So if there's any opposition to this resolution, then it's approved, unanimous consent.
okay, thank you very much. Then we'll take it on to the Great Plains Tribal Chairmans. But like we were saying, coordination, organization of everybody, treaty councils, water alliances, IRA governments, everybody, if we could just come to a consensus, then we could be more powerful with our movement, with our issues of protecting our land, water, and air. Okay, thank you. That's my story.
Too late.
Too late, it's approved. Oh, grab a
All right.
microphone and state your name.
We got one.
Can you grab a microphone, please?
Hi. Yes, Bill and I agree that International Indian Treaty Council could also be added as a separate entity in support. So if that could be done, that would be good for us.
Yes, very good. It is done.
Good. Ruth Ann Buffalo is our presenter now. I think she's talking about.
Hello? Is there a question on the floor regarding a consensus? Oh, it's passed? I didn't hear the question.
Yes, it's passed.
And then the topic is MMIW. missing children. Impact and no justice, or so she'll explain all that. I'm just reading the title.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. I want to be respectful as well and introduce myself in the Hidadza language. Nido Shadzi, Nakbaga O, Madashi, Mia Adashed, Ma Be Sigids, Ma Zigidads, Nakbaga O. I'm a woman appears. I carry my late grandmother Ruth's Hidadza name and her English name. My grandmother Ruth was a child of the Waterbuster clan, and my mom is a child of the Flint Knife clan. And I'm a member of the Awache clan, which is dripping earth or dripping dirt. I'm a Hidadza Mandan. My dad is also Chiricahua Apache, and I'm enrolled in the 3 affiliated tribes, so the Mandan, Hidadza, and Arikara Nation. I'm from Mandaree, which is located north on the Missouri River, but I live in Fargo on the other side of the state. And so I'm gonna, I was asked, thank you for the invite. I was asked to share a few words on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and then also to speak about the boarding school work and the continued unaccounted for of our missing children. So I'm going to start right now and give a brief update on the work that's happening nationally regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women through then Congresswoman Deb Haaland, now Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland. She introduced a piece of federal legislation called the Not Invisible Act Commission, and it is now passed into law. And so this commission is comprised of about 40 individuals who represent non-federal organizations and federal agencies. There's about 40 people on the Not Invisible Act Commission. I myself am a member of the commission, and the overall goal of this commission is to look and examine the missing and murdered Indigenous persons crisis and to find solutions. So we are hosting a number of field hearings across the country. They started in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the end of April, actually beginning of April. And then at the end of April, we were in Alaska for 7 days. We visited 3 remote villages, starting at Ketchikan, and then 2 days of formal hearings, field hearings in Anchorage, Alaska. And then after that, we went to Bethel for some site visits, and then finished in very tiny remote village called Imanik, which is about 190 miles away from Russia. So that was a very, very powerful stop. We took a 9-person charter plane from Bethel, and then from the tiny airstrip that we came in on, we had the option of, crowding into some trucks or to get to the community center, or we had the option of riding a snowmobile or 4-wheelers. So a few of us rode 4-wheelers from the airstrip to the community center. So the field hearings have been very impactful. It is an opportunity for community members to share their story and to be heard. All of this information is going to be compiled into a final report of recommendations that will go to Department of Interior, Department of Justice, and then Congress. So many of us within the commission are pushing for accountability and for justice for the families, for the survivors, and acknowledging the work that's been done, but also really keeping the focus on the people, having people-centered approaches, victim-centered approaches, survivor-centered approaches. So we really want to encourage people to continue to participate in these field hearings. So we started in Tulsa. also Anchorage, and then we just were in Flagstaff, Arizona. And to hear from the public, we will be going to Minneapolis, St. Paul, the beginning of June, and then middle of June, the commission will be going to Northern California, and then at the end of July, Billings, Montana. And then public comment is available to everyone to provide comment up until the end of August, I believe, but I can share all of this information with the organizers here. And there's also a virtual hearing in August. So if you're not able to attend any of the on-site field hearings, you can hopefully provide testimony through Zoom in August. So that's a little bit of the work that's happening across the country regarding the missing and murdered in Indigenous persons crisis. We know that each state has different efforts going, in every level of government. It was mentioned earlier, my role with helping with Savannah's Act. I live in Fargo. So when Savannah went missing, a lot of us dove in to help and find solutions. It wasn't the outcome that we had hoped for. And so we developed came together and formed a grassroots coalition, which is still functioning today. We just had our monthly Wednesday at noon meeting today. And so we continue to push for justice and accountability and to protect our loved ones, and to prevent further tragedies from happening. I'm not in the state legislature at the moment, but when I was elected in 2018, North Dakota, we serve 4-year terms and then we meet every other year. But this grassroots coalition sent me to Bismarck with 6 bills that I was able, as a collective, we were able to get those pieces of legislation introduced and passed in both the Senate and the House. But again, it's for protecting our loved ones and to prevent further tragedies from happening. So I think that's kind of a little bit on the work that I've done. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Paula Anton. Hi, Ruth. But I just want to say thank you for serving on that commission, because I've been following since Savannah's Act was passed. And I know they took so long to develop that commission. And I was just wondering how they're going to kind of catch up, because to me, it seemed like they were putting off establishing that commission as long as they could. And is there any efforts to help organize in other ways? What are the other things that they're going to be doing besides the site visits? Are they going to help start organizing a national database, a collective national database, and help with the communication between the jurisdictional problems that are occurring with the missing relatives?
Yes. Thank you, Madzigiradz. That's a very good question. And so there are 6 different subcommittees, and one of them is focused specifically on data collection. So that is an ongoing conversation that we are pushing for, to make sure that there is accountability. And it's been an interesting experience so far. We're at the table with federal prosecutors, U.S. attorneys, and then grassroots, and so it's and then elected officials, tribal leaders. It's a very broad coalition. They told us it's the most diverse commission in the federal government's history, because of how broad the representation is at the table, which makes it very interesting, because there's so much different perspectives all trying to come together and find solutions. And so a lot of times there are heated conversations, even amongst commissioners during field hearings, and Flagstaff was all of these hearings are very heavy, because we're hearing directly from families. Sometimes it's people's first time sharing their story publicly. too. And so it's, so we do have also support mechanisms in place to where we are using our traditional ways of helping people heal and to continue to be okay. And so, yeah, thank you for the question. Database is one of the priorities. Also, funding has been a constant theme in finding resources, not to say to be dependent upon the federal government, but to hold the federal government accountable and responsible. We heard from Navajo Nation recently, and the huge lack of funding they face is, of course, unfortunately, as we know, not unique to Indian country, but it just shines a bright light on the need to do better. And that what we're finding is that, you know, even with like the comment about taking so long to get this commission going, you know, it raises a lot of questions. And so there are a lot of us in the commission who are pushing to make sure that these efforts are more than, you know, just words on paper, just to look good on the shelf and not be used. So as a former state legislator, I've have that experience of seeing where we have to, when you get a new law put into place, you can't trust that it's going to be implemented. You have to follow it every step of the way to make sure that it's being enforced. And so with this Not Invisible Act Commission, I am thankful that, you know, Deb Holland and her staff put efforts to have this in place, but there's still a lot of work. And so many of us are making sure we push every day to make sure that this will have teeth and not just be a good gesture of bringing people together and sort of like a think tank. We want the results to be fruitful, so to speak, and to have teeth for sure. The pandemic, they said, did sort of sideline the efforts in getting it going on its proposed timeline, but the announcement was made last May 5th, and then we started meeting in July, like twice a week through Zoom, and then we had an abrupt stop in October, which was interesting too, because it just was an abrupt stop without explanation. And so it was due to the sunsetting of this federal piece of legislation, or this new law. And so we had to wait until January until it was reauthorized. And so as soon as January came around and it was reauthorized by Congress, the US Senate, then ever since then we've been hitting the ground running, meeting twice a week, 3 times a week. They brought us all together for a 2-day meeting last 2 days of February in DC at the Department of Interior. That was our first face-to-face meeting, but so yeah, it's the 6 different subcommittees all have a specific focus. One of them is recruitment, retention of law enforcement, data collection, the jurisdictions, coordination of services and communications across the different jurisdictions, also looking at prosecution, administrative and legislative changes, and victim services off the top of my head. But and then all of this information too can be found at doi.gov under Not Invisible Act Commission. And so if you can encourage relatives, community members to attend either the field hearings coming up in Minneapolis or Billings. If community members need assistance with travel too, please feel free to reach out to me, because we want to make sure that everyone has the support to attend these field hearings. Go ahead, I'm not sure who wants.
You got a question?
Thank you
Oh.
very much for the efforts and the presentation. I have 2 short questions, or one's more like a comment to back up what my sister said about the need for a national database, because when we've filed submissions at the United Nations to hold the US accountable, one of the problems is there is no national data, like there is in Canada, say, you know. missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in particular. And, you know, there's states, different states and a few different places have their own databases, but there's no consolidated database. So I just want to stress the importance of that for, you know, both national but international advocacy on this issue. And the second is a question, is the role of tribal law enforcement. I know, you know, just anecdotally, there in a lot of tribes, there's just not a follow through on missing women on the ground. And I'm not sure if your studies have felt that it's because of these conflicting jurisdiction or lack of jurisdictions in some tribes in some states. The difference in jurisdiction. I know my tribe was one of the test cases for the VAWA Act, but that's a different, you know, a different kind of laws in Arizona than in some states. Or if it's, you know, lack of funding or, you know, what is the engagement of tribal government in this, I mean, tribal law enforcement and tribal government, of course, in this process, and how can they be better equipped to respond, you know, to these cases when they happen on reservations, say.
Thank you for the questions. And no, I completely agree that there needs to be a federal, a national database for missing and murdered Indigenous. I think at the federal level, they're referring to it as persons. And I know it varies state by state, you know, like Minnesota has relatives, North Dakota, we have people without the S. So, you know, like, I think definitely we need a national database registry for sure, because oftentimes what we're hearing is piecemealed, you know, that term comes up a lot with what each state is doing differently. And I can speak to North Dakota. We had we were able to get a piece of legislation passed into law in 2019, but without funding for a database. And what that meant was basically it didn't move. It was not established because it didn't have funding. It initially had like a one-time fiscal note of $49,000, but it died on the Senate side. And the language too within that space is really harsh when you say like a bill died or it was dead on arrival. Or I'll tell a quick story too regarding the language there, because I really enjoyed the conversation. And you know, the stark difference between the language in those type of settings or spaces. I used to really encourage people to come into the Capitol, and I would say, you know, I'd make a Facebook post and I'd say, come sit with me on the floor. You know, everybody, you're welcome to come sit with me on the floor. And then I'd get messages and people would say, well, why are we sitting on the floor? Like, what are we protesting? You know, but hey, that was a joke. No. But so I was like, no, the House floor. So anyhow, but a lot of the bills that we introduced, I'll touch on this real quick when we talk about the boarding school initiatives, but some of the bills that were introduced were basically dead on arrival, they would say. But so anyhow, back in the North Dakota State Legislature, we were able to use ARPA funds to get the missing persons database up and running. And so we had to use federal dollars to get that going because it was not approved within the Attorney General's general budget, his operating budget. The other question real quick I'll address is the law enforcement. Again, with the different jurisdictions and then public law 280 states and jurisdictions or non-public law 280 jurisdictions is also another complexity. But what we're finding anecdotally right now in the common themes at field hearings is that tribal law enforcement does not have enough funds or resources. They need more people, we're told. And so I know Navajo Nation, which is pretty fresh on my mind, we were there just last week. The chief of police there shared that they are looking at lowering their the age of eligibility to apply to become a tribal law enforcement officer down to 18 years old. So they are having issues with recruitment and then retention. But go ahead.
I got a question, one more. Is there a ratio of how much of these missing Indian women is being found? That's my first question. The second is, I know in this area with us in South Dakota, even around Rapid, we always gotta watch our children because is sex trafficking kind of the major reason why they're missing?
Thank you for the questions. And back to the data, there's accurate number. We can have a guesstimate, but also there's so many different factors as to what contributes to this crisis. We have also heard from coroners' offices and medical examiners too, because that is also another area of another barrier to accurate data collection or accurate reporting, is that oftentimes we will be misclassified in so many different ways, including the coroner's office and the medical examiner's office. And reasons that contribute to the crisis, there's a whole number of reasons. You know, it could even be intimate partner violence, someone that you may know. It could also be, sadly, when we have our relatives run away and then they run into the wrong crowd, and then, you know, so there's just a plethora of reasons why. North Dakota, and I think everywhere else too, we're seeing a lot of our Native women be targeted, or our unhoused relatives being targeted for drug use, or being drugged and then paralyzed and murdered as a result from being drugged. So I definitely believe that we do need to call for a national state of emergency because we are less than 2% of the United States population. There isn't enough attention to the crisis, and Not Invisible Act Commission is a good effort, but I believe that there needs to be a national call to action saying this is a state of emergency, you know, not to make our relatives and loved ones live in fear, but to really drive home the need to look out for one another, protect each other, almost even, you know, don't stay out past dark, but, you know, things we know even happen in broad daylight. But it's just some of my thoughts. Thank you, Mads.
Okay, you're next, but is your
Ruth,
you
I had-
having a question or a comment?
I had my hand up over here for a while. Ruth, if you could touch on what you accomplished with Savannah's Act, because that'll give, you know, the people general idea of what you accomplished, because there's a lot of things that came out of that, even with law enforcement. So some of our people here might not understand Savannah's Act. So if you could cover that.
So thank you, Mads Gidads, and you know it definitely was a collective effort in anything that we do, and so first and foremost, working directly with the family and building a relationship with the family is important to get their input and guidance. Even when we were doing the search, you know, just asking, has anybody connected with the family? And the answer at that point was no. And so we, you know, just reaching out and being people, being human, you know, to one another is important. And so there was a lot of work that went into that piece of legislation. Former U.S. Senator Heidi Heitkamp carried the federal piece of legislation forward, but the Savannah's Act touches on communication, sharing of information across the different jurisdictions, and also a piece in there that has the U.S. attorneys also to develop a plan of action in lieu or in partnership with tribal governments, tribal partners. And so they're again pushing for accountability and follow-up to make sure that what is written into law is actually being enforced. And so what we're finding through these field hearings and various conversations within the Not Invisible Act Commission is that more efforts need to be done to make sure that Savannah's Act is being carried out to its fullest ability. And that requires cooperation from all partners. A common theme that has come up a lot is the jurisdiction conversation and how and why that continues to it's 2023, and so many of us try not to get too frustrated and say, how can this be a first time conversation for many about the different jurisdictions? Is there really a lack of knowledge there, or is there really a lack of will to address this issue?
Okay, go ahead.
Let's Emak toen ze op sneeuw met haar geven. Woyuk chankile na woyuk kiblahakile in Lila ota taku iwagla koki owaste e chanupi. Chahesloa na nawachu. Ash lak khotab na ha. Chaje kile oape ki ankata yanke ki he. Lila ota Wableze na woyuk chana ha wichoye on kit hope hena nach chimpe. Gea hechus e wakonki on kit hope tiata, hechus e wahonkum kiape. So wane to kile isam trokata ki atakum kishkonk te kile. Dueni lakhota wak sape kile trokata ki akachol yeshni. Wanchagna mila haskatra wichoye ki yapati ton trokata ki hechus ilalape. Ho, wanale taku wichincha kile wogla ke kile. Me elections e blukja. Na wambli khota kile e hani honkashla wa ki okhlate he najion ha. Lila wash ake suta oispe. Na wasloe kile na isha kaonspe ma ke he uncha elections e naji. Washichu ichaji ki he Roy Martin e chape. Ho he cha wana wanspe kile wana Ich bin ja als Ospema kitche he nus obeluspe. So wana ieska wankte mitake bicha. Diksuya po le wonach und shichukte nach unkte. Washichu et kantaha. What I wanted to express here about the paper that we have as a treaty summit, and there's a lot of us that want to get involved in these meetings and we talk about them. It's like my brother Reno was expressing. One of the things that I really get alarmed with is every time when we have meetings like this, okay, regardless of how you feel, whether it's bad or good, I could care less. I think about one thing. Why do we always depend on the Washichu's way of doing things, especially with law enforcement? Law enforcement is part of the problem why a lot of our children and women become missing. But nobody gets to those issues. Now, when we talk this way, I'm looking at this word. You say, Wolak is a code. Wa'ohola is the second one. Okay? For a lot of us that are treaty prone and reservation prone, let's just put it that way. We still live amongst our people that are still in poverty, that probably want to come to a meeting like this and listen to what we're all discussing and conducting today. I've been in all these struggles with all of you, seen you, past and present. But today we have never, ever, and you'll all agree with me on this, we have never, ever blamed the white man physically. Instead, we keep giving him this value of our way. So nothing works. So now we're using his way of life to promote attention, understanding. Tired of listening to that. Taku me wa chink te kile. Wash ake trankite ake hechus enaji ke watching. And if I ask a lot of you in the crowd here, it's going to probably puzzle you. There's only one thing that Chanupa Gluha money wants, aka Dennis Dwayne Martin Sr. You know what I want, people? Is to be free and left alone. And the only way you're going to have that is you're going to have to demand it. But we're not getting to them points. So my question to you, when you talked about this issue about law enforcement, I do believe our tribal president made that initiative to use certain Okolakiches, societies, okay, to promote that type of infrastructure of law enforcement personnel. But today, in the year 2023, you know, May 17th, we have not even got into those things, but we're over here again. Over here. So this is my point. Why do we still want white man's law enforcement for our tribal police when they do nothing? Nothing. That's not offensive. It's the truth. I want to get to those kind of answers. Mitaki let's hala ke se tako ephe ki mila haska tawichoy ogna. Iyuk champo. If Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Rain in the Face, Gall, No Ears, even Machpia Luta, if they were all in here, Shichawalak Oktix, Mitaki do any lakhote kile ata paslampi. But you won't say, you won't clap for that. See? So this indoctrination is a continuation of what we're facing. So as
Let me interrupt you, Mr. Martin. Do you have a question here somewhere?
as Wamblichotas, that question I asked.
Where
Why
you
do we want that?
Haji?
That question. Why do we
You
want more
will ask the
cops?
question.
That's the question. Why do we want more cops?
Yes, well, thank you for the question, and I agree wholeheartedly. You know, I'm from Mandaree, and it's known as the heart of the Bakken oil formation. And so, I mean, I can share stories of my experience there. You know, I used to run my tribal nation's summer youth employment program. And one summer, we had a summer youth worker who escaped a abduction in broad daylight. She was on her way to the powwow, Mandaree celebration was happening. And this little red truck pulled up and two men got out and tried to pull her into the truck with her. She was about my height, 16 years old, but she was able to fight and get away and run to the closest house for safety. And of course it was reported to law enforcement, but during that time, during that summer of, gosh, what was it, 2013, 2012, that was one of the peak summers for the most oil activity, population growth in the area. It was the second oil boom in Western North. You know that with oil booms, there's population growth, which puts additional strain on an already weak infrastructure from roads to law enforcement. And so within MHA Nation, which I'm a member of, there have been times when we would call dispatch and report suspicious activity, like a car just parked up, you know, overlooking my mom's house, for example. And so living in Mandaree, we'd call dispatch and they would say, all of our units are in partial for the powwow, which is about an hour and a half away from Mandaree. So we do need law enforcement in very rural areas. I think to not have law enforcement in Fargo, you know, I know there's this big wave of defund the police and put funding more into behavioral health. But I see on the flip side, you know, that is more of a coming from a place of privilege from a built environment full of resources like Fargo. But when you think of Mandaree, yes, they have this new found oil wealth, but they're not there yet. We have so much, we're not there yet in terms of ample coverage to keep our communities safe. And so back to that summer, when we had a summer youth worker escape abduction in broad daylight, what I did in that moment was try to meet with our council reps who were very pro-oil. And so having that challenge even within my home community of Mandaree and wanting to get meetings convened with our Blackmouth Society. But, you know, then I had to get going back to KU Med Center where I was taking Master Public Health classes and I was a Susan G. Komen Scholar at that time. But so there's definitely efforts that have been made to include or integrate our cultural ways. So I don't want to come across as though I'm pushing, you know, the white man's law or, you know, I've been in those spaces and I've learned and my heart is with the people. I'm a Hidatsa Mandan Apache woman. And so I'm just here to share updates on the work that's being done nationally. It's not going to be the be all end all, but it is something that we are doing. Even within that commission space, it's challenging as a Native woman to make sure that we're being heard, even within our subcommittees. You know, I'm a co-chair with someone actually from this community. And so just seeing the disparity within gender roles as a Native woman in that space, we're all supposed to be equal, but we still continue to push. So there's a lot of stuff that you don't really see behind the scenes that we're pushing for, even to have an equal voice as a Native woman within that commission has been a struggle.
Okay, we've been told that we need to close because we have closing ceremonies still pending. And so I'll let you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for being involved with that commission. I imagine it must be really straining and hard, physically and spiritually. I just want to say thank you for that. But originally, you know, I'm not sure if everybody in the room is real familiar with Savannah's Act when it was passed, but it was originally passed directing the Department of Justice to enact, you know, coordinate, pull together, you know, resources, databases, and all this stuff. You know, my question is, how in the world, I know it's not your fault, but how in the world did a congressional act go from the Department of Justice to DOI?
Right, and I think from what my understanding is that, you know, the Not Invisible Act Commission is close and dear to Department of Interior, Deb Holland's heart and her staff. And so they are the main drivers behind the Not Invisible Act Commission. It is in partnership with the Department of Justice. So Mayor Garland will also receive this report. But we are learning a lot of things in this process. And we would like to see more of a presence and input from the Department of Justice. Yeah. All right, thank you, Madzagirad. So I guess I'm not gonna be able to cover the missing children's boarding school, but that's okay, another time. Okay. All right, Madzagirad, thank you.
Matakipi, Ruth, we're gonna try to get you some time tomorrow to finish your presentation on the boarding schools. Okay. Have to keep an open ears.
I had to borrow his mic. My battery died on mine, but Tanashi Sid had a good idea on these cards that were handed out. I'm I don't know how it works. So did you scan the code and then put it out or took a picture? But anyway, everybody that has a Facebook page in here, put this out so we can get the word spread to our people to comment on the mineral withdrawal. And breakfast will be served tomorrow morning at 8:30. And I think that's about it. If we can get Wendell. Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go. You got battery on this stuff. Yeah, so what we'll do is some items here. Mike, can you come up? President Stark comes out. Come on up. Isaac, you. So I want to thank everybody for everybody for hanging out the whole day and staying with us. You know, we do have a lot of issues that we still need to cover. We got 2 more days to get through this. I want to thank Wendell for bringing the pipe. I want to thank the president for bringing the staff. As you know, something we talked about with the Black Hills Sioux Nation Council and Pine Ridge, that the Oglalas need to have a staff. So, you know, hopefully everybody else, all the other tribes can get a staff too. With that, I ask the singers to render either a chief song or a pipe song. Talk yesterday.